Welcome back to English Adventures with Teacher Kim, where I create videos to help you improve your English skills and share stories about my teaching and travels in Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos over the past 8 years. Today's video is about adverbs of frequency. Adverbs of frequency are words that tell how often the action happens, how often the verb in the sentence happens. Does the action happen many times or not much at all? Is it something you do a lot or only a few times? Adverbs of frequency tell us how often we do something. What I'm going to do is offer 5 different levels of words that will help you express how often something happens. Here are words from those 5 levels. Never, 0%. Rarely, hardly ever, seldom, 10%. Occasionally, sometimes, 25%. Often, frequently, 50%. Normally, generally, usually, regularly, say 75 to 80%. Always, 100%. If an action happens all the time, every time, we use the word always. All right, so here's some examples. The first level I gave was never, 0% of the time. That means out of 100 times, we never do this. All right? Here's an example. She never forgets to do her homework. Does she forget to do her homework? No, she never forgets to do her homework. The teacher is never late for class. Is the teacher ever late for class? No, the teacher is never late for class. Maybe you've done something a few times, but not very often. Not very much. Okay, if an action happens maybe 10% of the time or less, but it does happen, then we use adverbs like rarely, hardly ever, or seldom to describe how frequently it happens. Here are some examples. He rarely misses a wedding. So, does he miss weddings of his friends? No, he rarely misses. He always goes. All right? Here's another example. She hardly ever misses volleyball practice. Does she miss volleyball practice? No, not very often. She goes to volleyball practice a lot, almost all the time. All right? She hardly ever misses volleyball practice. I seldom drink soda. Do I drink soda? Yes, but it's very rare. Only seldom. I seldom drink soda. Using rarely, hardly ever, and seldom tells us that it doesn't happen very much. Maybe 5-10% of the time. When something happens more frequently than that, maybe 25% of the time, we use the words like occasionally and sometimes. Here's an example. She occasionally walks home from school when her mother is too busy to pick her up. Does she walk home from school? Yes, but it's not very often. Her mother usually picks her up from school. If her mother is busy, she walks home. So she occasionally walks home when her mother is busy. I sometimes forget to take my phone with me. Do I forget to take my phone with me? Yes, but most of the time I remember. Sometimes I forget to take my phone with me. When the action happens 50 to say 75% of the time, we can use words like often and frequently to describe how often or how many times we do something. I often eat rice soup for breakfast. Do I eat rice soup for breakfast? Yes, most of the time. Do I eat other things for breakfast? Yes, but more than half of the time, I eat rice soup. Here's another example. I frequently walk 2 kilometers for exercise. Do I walk every day 2 kilometers? No, sometimes more, sometimes less, sometimes not at all that day. But I frequently walk 2 kilometers for exercise. If it happens 80 to 90% of the time, we can use adverbs like normally, generally, usually, regularly. Here's an example. I normally eat breakfast at about 7 a.m. So sometimes I eat breakfast later, sometimes I eat breakfast earlier, but normally my usual practice is to eat breakfast at 7 a.m. Here's another example using the word generally. He is generally a happy person. Sometimes he's not happy, but most of the time, more than half of the time, but not all the time, he is a happy person. Here's another example. I usually go to bed before 10:30 p.m. Sometimes I go to bed later, sometimes I go to bed earlier, but usually I go to bed before 10:30 p.m. Here's an example using the word regularly when it happens maybe 75-80% or more of the time, but not all the time. Ling works out regularly at the gym. He works out very often at the gym. Sometimes he misses, but usually you can find Ling working out at the gym. Ling works out regularly at the gym. If something happens 100% of the time, we use the adverb always. I always brush my teeth before I go to bed. That's the opposite of I never brush my teeth. Okay, so I always brush my teeth before I go to bed. Do I forget? No, I always brush my teeth before I go to bed. Okay, this has been a simple lesson that helps you build your vocabulary using adverbs of frequency. These are 5 different levels of words that you can use to describe how often something happens. Thank you for joining me for this video, and be sure to look for other videos that you might be interested in on my channel. And I've given a couple of examples here. Thank you very much.